Okay. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Hunter College High School Alumni Association's Black History Month um, program on alums in the arts. Um, I'm Judith Daniel. I'm the class of 1979. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Alumni Association. I'm the chair of its Diversity Committee. Thank you for joining us for this evening. It's important to remember and acknowledge people and events in the history of Black people in this country, because in truth, it's all American history. It's important to remember and honor our alums of our dear school and alma mater. And tonight we will be having a conversation with two distinguished Black alums in the arts. But before I introduce you to this evening's guests of honor, I would like to highlight a few alums that are in this category. Now I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Okay. There we go. So of course we know Ruby Dee, and Martina Arroyo. We also know Janice Pendarvis, vocalist and songwriter, and Young MC, a rapper and performer. But I want to just showcase three specific alums, the first one being Ophelia DeVore, class of 1940. And she was the first Black American model. And she was one of the founders of the Grace DeMarco Agency, which was one of the few modeling agencies of its time where non-white models can get work. It's through this agency that, people that we know, Diane Carroll, Cicely Tyson, Robert Roundtree, and other people of color in the performing arts got their start. Audre Lorde, class of 1951, is a spoken word artist and writer. She used her creative talents to confront and address social justices. At Hunter, Audre was the editor of the school newspaper. She published her first poem at age 17, in 17 magazine, and that was after the high school paper rejected it for being inappropriate. She's famous for many publications and of her spoken word, and she was chosen as New York State Poet Laureate of 1991-1992. The third person I want to showcase is Carlina Olivia Cole, class of 1960. She's an actress, the first Black actress to win an Emmy for Best Supporting Actress in a miniseries for her performance as Matilda, Chicken George's wife, in the 1977 miniseries Roots. She was also nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Miniseries or Movie for her role as Maggie Rogers in the 1979 miniseries Backstairs at the White House. Now, when Roots came on in 1977, I was a student at Hunter, and I recall hearing talk about her from a teacher at Hunter, and I remember him praising the acting skills she displayed while at the high school. So, of course, we know there are many alums of color that are in the arts. Now, I have to get back to, please forgive me, technology is not my strong point. Stop sharing, okay. So, but I now want to introduce you to two of our two guests for the evening. The first being Chuma Hunter Gold, class of 1990. He's an actor who has been working in television, film, and theater for over 25 years. He is known for being in the TV sitcom Girlfriends, in the movie Nina and Game of Silence, and in August Wilson's stage play, Gem of the Ocean. He is now directing a production of this play at the University of Georgia, where his mother has a historical connection. And he is also recording a book on Black experience. And our second guest for the evening is Chloe Bass, class of 2002. She is a conceptual artist who engages in performance, conversation, publication, and installations, which focuses on the dimensions of human intimacy. She is known for her work, the Bureau of Self-Recognition and the Book of Everyday Instructions, and is currently working on, and it may be completed by now, Our Obligation to Others, Hold Me in My Place. She has held many fellowships and residency, and her work has been seen nationally and internationally. And she is also Assistant Professor of Arts at Queens College. So with that introduction, I'm going to ask my first question of Chuma, but I will ask them both this question. Chuma, and hopefully in our conversation tonight, we'll get more about the work that they've done in the past and the work that they're doing presently. But Chuma, what I would like to ask you is, when did you first discover the artist within you? And what classes and experience at Hunter would you say influenced your decision to pursue this as a career goal?
That's a great question. I just dropped, not that I'm trying to sell the book or anything, but I just dropped that book I'm doing in the chat. If anybody wants to check it out, I'm not trying to sell it. I'm not connected to it like that. But it was a remarkable experience, and to apropos your question, I tend to get work at specific times in my life when I need to learn a lesson or be taught a lesson. And interestingly enough, I'm not a big kind of like self-help kind of guy. I mean, I've done lots of therapy and stuff like that, but self-help books and magazines I kind of left behind, in the supermarket magazine aisle. But this one I was hired to do, and there was actually some really interesting stuff in there, and it's applicable to young adults as well as high school students. So if anybody's curious, that hard copy is I guess they sell it on Amazon, and at some point in time the audio version that I just did will come out probably in a couple of months. So that being said, I think that the story I always tell, am I talking too loud? Am I like blowing anybody's speakers out or anything? Okay. The story I always like to tell, and I am going to snitch on myself a lot probably tonight. But I can't believe I'm going to tell the story. So and we all went to those of us who started Hunter in kindergarten and made it all the way through 12th grade. We at least our year, we called ourselves the survivors, right? And in 6th grade, there was a bunch of us. There was me, Alex Shub, Jacob Pine, Johnny Goldman, Jake Hendrickson, and a couple other guys. That was like sort of the big cabal. And then there was on the late for the girls, it was like Thisbe, Jocelyn, Alicia Goldstein, I think was part of their little crew. She came a little bit later. Miranda Flory, and in music class, Miss Manser, we would do a show at the end of the year every year. And 6th grade was kind of the last time you could do it. And I don't know, I had never really gotten into it or really sweated it before that. But in 6th grade, we were doing South Pacific. And Miss Manser, I believe, maybe even asked me to audition. She said, "Can you come audition for this?" I didn't know nothing from auditioning for nothing. And I said, "Well, maybe who's doing it?" And she said, "Well, all the guys that you hang out with and all the girls and everything." And at the time, I had sort of a long-running, awkward crush on Thisbe. And I figured, okay, well, if I get in the play, if I'm one of the sailors or something, I can at least get in a scene or two, and hang out and see her a little bit longer, be rehearsals and stuff, right? So we have the auditions, you got to sing a couple of songs, and it's like a big group thing. And I haven't been to an elementary school audition in a long time, so I don't really remember how it was. But I guess the next day she posted everybody's parts on it, and I'm looking down at the bottom and everybody's running, and I see Thisbe like cheer, and then I see her get really dejected. I was like, oh, what's going on over there with the cast list? And I walk over the cast list and I see Thisbe Nissen is playing Nellie at the top. And I go, okay, well, yeah, she got the main character. And I look, and I'm looking down at the bottom and all the sailors and stuff for my name. And I'm going up the list and I can't find it. And then it's getting into the guys with bigger, meatier, juicier parts. And we get all the way up to the top. I didn't even expect my name to be there, but she cast me as Emile DeBeck, who is opposite Nellie in South Pacific, right? They're love interests. So that was quite a moment for me. I think that was probably one of my crowning achievements in terms of my theater career, was that I got cast as the lead in the play over, and shout out to my guys. I always just thought Alex and Jake and Johnny and all those guys, I just thought they were the coolest guys. We were good friends. I liked them a lot and kind of looked up to them a little bit, for different various reasons. And as we go through, and this story, I'll make it fast, but this story has an interesting sort of come around. So we go through the thing, right, of course, and I'm like, 11, I've got this big afro, and they put baby powder at the temples to make me look older, which ironically, I should do a 40 years ago comparison because I'm doing the same thing. And there's a kiss and there's a duet. It's just like I'm in heaven. It's like I could die after 6th grade after all of this, right? And my mother, to this day, on her dresser, has this gorgeous picture of me and Thisbe singing the finale, holding hands at the front lip of the stage, holding hands, belting it out. And I look happier than anybody on the planet. And Thisbe singing her song. And I remember that image. It burned into my brain for 50 years. Thisbe is now a well-regarded and published author, and she has a wonderful Instagram where she's got all these great photos of her travels. And I don't know if it was on the Instagram or if she sent it to me, and I never mentioned, Thisbe has no idea, except for maybe at the time, that I had this big crush on her. And we don't talk about it. I don't bring it up. And she sent me this photo. She was like, oh, great. Look at this photo I found of all of us in South Pacific. And it was 2 seconds before my parents' photo. And she's by herself singing up on stage. And I'm like, got my back turned. You can't even see me. And I don't know, somebody will probably tell her now because I'm stitching on myself. But inside I was like, I got you. I got the picture with you. I can prove it. We were holding hands.
You have the receipts.
I got receipts.
That's a great story.
Yeah. So that was probably, at Hunter, and then it took me another 8 years before I really got on the stage again. But yeah, that was definitely my first exposure where I was really sort of in that center of that, where I was appreciated for any kind of talent I might have had. It was a big moment for me. Yeah.
Thank you. And Chloe, I'll ask you the same question. When did you first discover the artist in you?
Yeah, I do have the video of our 6th grade play because I am also a survivor. But I also have the digitized video of our nursery play. And I came to Hunter as the daughter of an artist. So I was well situated to believe in myself in this way. My mother is also an artist, but certainly being at Hunter the entire time, I was a different kind of artist than the person I grew up to be, because at the time I was sort of doing almost everything I could to minimalize my visual arts engagement and maximize my music and theater engagement, which was really who I thought I was going to be in just about every way. The person I had been trying to be since that nursery play, right? And I'm grateful actually that we were required to take art history, right? To take drawing, to take painting, to develop these other types of skills that on my own, I will be honest, I was not naturally drawn to, because that is the world that I wound up in. And being fluent in some of those skills from studying with teachers at Hunter is the last time I had it. I didn't do it in undergrad. I didn't do it in grad school. My first time in a studio art program has been teaching in one now. And I've kind of been learning what it is to do that through the experiences that I have with my students. Whereas, right, I have work that's presented in this fine arts context in galleries and museums, but I still think of it as theater. So that's what I bring from Hunter to the things that I'm doing now.
Yeah, so it sounds like for both of you that just the early experiences of the classes and the opportunities that Hunter had to offer. And I didn't go to the elementary school, so I just know from 7th grade on, and I can say the same for me because I studied dance at Hunter and I became a dance therapist. But it sounds like the two of you just having the exposure of the arts at school, lit that fire and stayed with you. Like Chloe, as you're saying, those experiences are experience that you never got again in formal education. And Chuma, you internalize that feeling of, being with the woman that you cared for and as a leading man and having that. And I'm sure you took that with you to other roles that you played. So Chloe, I'm going to ask you the next question. In your present day work, I noticed that you progress from working with the individual or about the individual to working to the family. Can you talk about the progression in your work?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, the work that I do takes a lot of different forms and travels through a lot of different places and spaces. I've worked in a lot of different ways, but I like to work with and about people. And that is something that I'm drawing from the theater, right? Which is a space that requires the participation of a lot of people in order to exist. I still want to work in those frameworks, even if I'm not making a play. So I am really, really interested in this idea of intimacy. And I mean that in a lot of different ways. I think that some very beautiful things are intimate. I think that some very terrible things have been intimate. Slavery being like the maybe most obvious terrible example of intimacy in American history, right? And I think that some really innocuous things are intimate. And all of those things carry a kind of weight and value that impact the way that we live, but we're not always able to put our finger on how. So I am trying to make work that allows people to be more aware of that, whatever that means for them. And the way that I'm doing it is kind of by studying what happens with intimacy at different scales of group size. So I did a project called the Bureau of Self-Recognition, which was like a 2-year project where I was just interested in the intimacy between a person and themselves. I then did 3 years on one-on-one relationships, and that was called the Book of Everyday Instruction. And I'm now working on a project called Obligation to Others Holds Me in My Place, which is basically turning into like a 4-year investigation of intimacy at the scale of the immediate family, focusing on mixed race, mixed cultural families in America, but not exclusive to that, because I'm really not interested in highlighting that experience as being particularly special, but actually as it being kind of like very normal and very American and very much part of our cultural framework in ways that we tend to either like exoticize and make magic, or there's this other group of people that's like, how will the kids identify? It's so sad, it's so hard. And like both of those are very, very boring to me in my personal experience. So one of the things that I get to do as an artist is take things that we see in our everyday lives and show them to you in a new way so that maybe you can have a different sense of your life or of history or of the future. And that's what I'm doing as I increase these group sizes. So I'm going to keep doing it. I'm interested in the intimacy of like all of New York as I listen to, Midtown out my window, right? I think that there's a lot of potential in all of this, and we know it from living it, but making projects that people can actually go through and have that affirmed or confirmed is very important to me.
Thank you. And Chuma, I'm gonna go to one of your roles, and what I know you in, and that's in the sitcom Girlfriends, where you played Greg. And Greg was a talented but struggling artist who had a college sweetheart who was a diva, Tony Childs. Can you talk about if you had any struggles in your time as an artist, from the time you were lead in South Pacific to now, like what was your struggles about, if any?
What were my struggles in all that time? I think for me, I mean, I'll be in the present and be in the now. I think the biggest struggle for me is, you know, I'm almost 50, and I kind of thought that I'd be on an offer only actor by this point. You know, I just thought that was the way it sort of went. And, you know, I fucked around and had a lot of success early in my late 20s and my early 30s, and got to a point where really mentally I wanted to be more and more of who I was versus more and more of where I was getting taken in my career. And so it's kind of twofold. Understanding that you know, a career in the arts never stops, like the grind never stops. Like you never, even if you get really successful, you don't reach a point unless, you know, like if I were on a show that ran for a really super long time and I had money in the bank, and even in that situation, I've been on the precipice, you know, of stardom. So, you know, as many times as I can count in both hands. And that takes a toll, you know, getting close and missing, and then the guy next to you who you've known for a long time, who maybe used to understudy for you all the time, he gets the gig and now he's making $75K a week, you know, and getting Emmy nominations and shit. And really more than the money, being able to take any person's perspective, any person's point of view, any person's passions, and with that platform of being sort of a well-known figure in entertainment, because that's really where I'm based, to be able to use that as power to create change, right? So I struggle against what I call the gatekeepers, and I feel like I've been mostly based in LA. I've done work on Broadway in New York. I've done producing work all over the country, and directing work all over the country, and acting work in several different locations. And the thing at my age that stands out to me is that there are select people who, you know, watch the gates of access. And I think if I were to, you know, be born again and have another life, I would want the presence of mentors. I came out here young and dumb and said I was just going to go ahead and see what I was in graduate school. And I left graduate school. I didn't really think it was the place for me, because at the time I applied, I had already been working for 2 or 3 years. And something inside me told me that West Los Angeles movies, that really depended on being young and getting out there and getting after it. And in my, you know, youthful exuberance, I left NYU and did just that. And I mean, if you look around, I've been able to do a wide variety of things, but that's all been really, so much of it has been self-motivated, because, which I think all artists really do, but there is not a great structure outside of the academic system. There's not a great structure for young, certainly not young artists of color, of mentorship and guidance and leadership and recognizing talent and bringing it along, or having places that you can go and sit at the feet of your elders and learn things. So I think over my career now, one of the major things that I'm working on is trying to find ways to be that mentor, to find younger artists and younger performers, especially you know, men of color, women of color, and really talk to them and sit with them and be with them about their careers. I got a young brother that I was speaking at the Kennedy, I call it CAF, the Kennedy Center and Theater Conference that they have all over the country, that spawns the Irene Ryans, like an acting competition. And this one was the playwriting. And I was going as a representative of the William Inge Center for the Arts and the Inge Festival out in Independence, Kansas. And I had come up with a scholarship program for their playwrights to bring them to the school and everything. And I did a talk that I do, a workshop called The Business of the Business. And I was just going through my Instagram, and a couple of the young kids have stayed in touch, but one of them who I particularly mentor is a young man out of Tampa. And one of the things I said was, as an actor, you can't just be an actor anymore. When I first got to LA, you could make a nice living doing character work if you never even got a lead role. But all that really started to change. And I said, you got to really be a writer and make your own space. And 8 months later, he had a short that he wrote that was touring on festivals and stuff. And now he's got another film. And as soon as I get off of this meeting, I'm going to coach him for a film audition this evening. And I'm doing all of this. He's not paying me. I'm not asking for any money or anything, because that was the one thing, a big thing I think for me that was missing. My parents gave me an incredible amount of support, but neither of them are in the entertainment industry. So as a young man, I was really kind of on my own. I was in new territory. So yeah, that's the thing in my career over this like long span. Yeah, I've done lots of TV. I've done lots of theater. I got books on tape and did some stuff with NPR for their Sunday night reading stuff. But really in the present for me, I still think there's a big fish out there for me. And if not a big fish, then my next sort of goal or my next important thing is to really try to help the generation behind me get the kind of guidance and assistance that I felt was lacking when I was coming up.
Thank you for that response. And
I don't know if that answered your question. I hope
it did.
Got close.
It perfectly, yeah, it answered my question in terms of the struggle, because it sounds like you had a, from what I'm hearing from you, it wasn't so much the struggle to get the job, but it was more of the struggle to find your place and to have those, that you could turn to help you along the way.
Yeah.
And that's what was missing. And that can be a struggle in any career. I imagine that, Chloe, I saw you nodding, that you may have had similar experiences. It's like, who do I turn to mentor me, to give me advice, So, and I think that many of us have had that type of experience, but especially in the field that you're in. I want to ask a follow-up question to you, Chuma, about, related, but, different. Now, you in the movie Nina, and the actress who played Nina it was criticism because she had to darken her skin to play the role. So there was a lot of to look like the character. Now, has skin color ever played any part in your professional experiences, positive or negative?
I mean, I say I was born in the wrong decade, right? Because like if I had come up, with Sidney Poitier, then like light skin and blue eyes, might have been something they'd have been onto. But I came into Hollywood at a time when really the strongest case for Black representation was Thug number 1, Thug number 2, the bad guys. There are a few standouts, obviously, but Hollywood certainly, and the casting people do mix between theater and television and movies. Everybody's got to struggle, right? Like everybody's got to struggle, and everybody's got to overcome. So, I'm not going to say that all the cards were stacked up against me, because really, I think it kind of comes down to, just to a certain extent, it comes down to your own hard work and creating opportunities for yourself. While saying that, I can say that being in this industry 28 years, I do notice things. I notice proclivities. You notice how things are getting cast, and then you just get told straight to your face. I mean, I used to go in the early days for Stephen Bochco a lot, when Bochco was producing a lot of work. And I was killing these auditions. I was like 28, 29 years old. I was yoked up, pretty, had a baldy. I like the acting was right there. I was coming off a hit show. I think I had just done a pilot, and I had 2 or 3 Bochco auditions in a row. And this is not to, if anybody knows Stephen Bochco, this is not to talk shit about Stephen Bochco, but his casting director, after a particularly awesome, from my point of view, audition, said, you know, you're really a fine actor, but Bochco's not going to hire you for this. Like, you don't look like we need you to look. And, you know, that was hard for me because growing up in my family, like, you know, being sort of clean cut and well spoken, that was the goal, right? Like you went to a school like Hunter, you had, you know, Shakespeare orations, or you had to read your book reports out loud at home, and you had to have great English and diction. And in the 70s and the 80s, it was, how do we get more education, you know, for us to represent ourselves well in this paradigm of America, right? And now in the late 90s, in the 2000s, and in the teens and the 20s, it's how do we represent our culture from the hood as best we can? How do we thug out as hard as we can? How do we get on as the next rapper as hard as we can? And it was, for me, the idea of colorism is a sticky slope, because again, I can't put my success or failure of my career just on how I look, but I've had too many times told to my face, you know, the guys that ran the show, Narcos, also a really big show. I got close on an audition for that, for a major character. And I knew one of the show creators, like, came to my shows, my plays, because one of his writers was his boy. And every single show of mine he came to in Los Angeles, God damn, Chuma, you're such a good actor. I want to work with you. I can't wait to work with you. You're so authentic. This, that, just smoke. And for years. And then turn around with the best thing he had. And I had, again, another fantastic audition, probably had some great credits in the bank by this point. And I bumped into him somewhere and he said, yeah, man, we want people harder. We just need tougher, harder looking guys. So, you know, as an actor, that's kind of a slap in the face. And as a light-skinned man, you know, you can't help but go, God damn, if I have the same talent level, but was, you know, a beautiful brown complexion like Yaya Jeffrey-Zell, or, you know, or had that nice smooth baldy like Coach Austin, then maybe I might be getting a little bit more of this work, you know. And on the other hand, here's the thing that fucks your head up, though. On the other hand, I got to a point where I didn't want to, as Coach knows, I was a basketball player. I ran track. And in college, when I didn't make the basketball team, I ended up racing motorcycles and, you know, being fit for that and all that stuff. I was an athlete for my first 20 years of my life. And I got to Los Angeles thinking that it wasn't going to be about athletics. It was going to be about hard work and skill and talent in the craft. And I looked around and all my peers were six-packed and taking their shirts off and being sexy. And it got me to a point where I started to feel like chattel. I started to feel like, in my head, just from my background, where I came from, the emphasis on the physique of the Black actor, or the Black male actor, and the fetishization of this sort of uber man, it got to me. And I went through a long period of my career where I resisted, and I did everything I could. I put on a lot of weight. I grew my dreads out. I had a big shaggy beard. And I said, well, I see scruffy, overweight guys playing character roles on TV all the time. But for some reason, again, it never could quite plug in for me in that sense. So, you know, there's a lot of shit that goes into any individual's career and the decisions they make. And for me, it just seemed like there were times where there were watershed moments where I had to be who I was or be what they wanted me to be. And I guess the one thing I can always say, I don't have any regrets of not ever not being me. And I just did it. I did it my way.
Thank you for the honest sharing of your experiences. Chloe, I know that your art, like art is a personal medium, you know. What percentage of your personal history would you say is presented in your work?
This is one of those questions that comes up a lot, and actually, the prevailing opinion, if you ask people who are familiar with my work, is a lot, and the reality is very, very little. So I make this work that feels intensely personal across a variety of metrics, and that's part of what I do as an artist. And I never actually represent any of those experiences as specifically mine. But because it feels very personal and is often, when I have text in my work written in a first person framework, people assume that they're my experiences. I have no problem with that. But I actually never said that they were mine. They're not things that I'm taking from other people. They're things that I'm observing, or they're things that I'm inventing. And they're things that I want to give back to you or whoever in a way that touches you deeply, right? So if you need to believe that that's me in order to do that, that's interesting. In a way, I need to believe that it's you, or it could be you. And that some of these experiences, if I'm careful with the way that they're given or relayed, will actually bring people together in a way that has some commonality. That said, right, I think that there is a risk when we assume that we are just like others. I think that empathy is great in some ways, and then when we kind of apply it too far out to politics is really, really risky, because I don't know exactly why we would need to feel the same as other people in order to believe that they are people or that their experiences are real. And I'd like to say that, like, maybe I could feel totally different from you, maybe I could feel totally different from Chuma and still believe, right, that all of these experiences are real and the things that we've gone through have meaning to us and are worthy of being represented. So I'm walking a line oftentimes between like over-identification either with me or over-identification with each other, and also trying to touch people with like very personal material. So there are a few things that appear in my work that are definitely directly from my life. Most of them are really obvious, like a picture of me and my mom and my dad, you know, like that's definitely from my life. And then there's a lot of other things that I'm extrapolating based on ways that I've been able to move through the world, other people that I've come into contact with, things that I've observed more socially, and other layers of experience that are personal and not mine.
Okay, thank you. Well, the follow-up question to that, you know, Chuma spoke about often going for a job and not being exactly who they want or who they think they want, and really trying to be true to himself. Has that ever happened with you, that, you know, that you have to, there's a struggle of being true to yourself as opposed to giving them what they want or what they think they're looking for? Or
Yeah, through some combination of like stubbornness and good fortune, being myself all the time is the thing that I am the best at. That's not to say that I'm always who people are expecting or who people want to see, but like for whatever reason, and I think this is actually one of the reasons that I left the theater, was that I felt like I was really being asked to be a lot of different people based on a lot of different characteristics that people perceived about me that were not myself. And I was interested in that in art, but I was not interested in carrying that throughout my life, right? As a mode of sort of cultivating a persona to succeed professionally. So I walked away from the theater for a bunch of different reasons, but that was one of them. And then, you know, of course, that happens in the art world as well, right? There's a real cult of personality around artists, especially Black artists, especially right now, especially young Black artists, not necessarily especially young Black female artists, but it leans that way in this moment. And I'm kind of trying to do my best job of like occupying some of those spaces while still being me, understanding that that means I'm choosing to put down certain types of opportunities that are good ones, but that are not good ones for me personally. And I do remember, I'm trying to remember like who the speaker was. We had a speaker at Hunter for some assembly when I was in maybe 10th or 11th grade. This person worked in the arts. I don't remember who it was, but I do remember that they said something that like totally freaked me out for a decade. So it was one of those experiences. And the person was like, you know, some of you are going to work in careers in the arts, and I want to let you know that like to do that well, to do that long term, you're going to have to give up a lot of things. And you're going to have to give up this, and you're going to have to give up that, and you're going to have to give up this, and you're going to have to give up that. And like my 15-year-old brain was like, all at once? Like I have to give it up today to commit? And I was kind of thinking, can I do that? And of course, the person did not mean all at once. And I think also the idea that you necessarily have to give up all these things for a career in the arts is not actually always true. So it was probably that person's experience coming to bear in advice that they were giving to younger people. But I will say that, like, if you give up yourself, you are not going to get that back. So like whatever it is that you're doing in whatever field that you're in, and I think especially honestly, if you're coming from any type of minority background, if you give up yourself, like people are eager to see you lose yourself. They're not eager to see you succeed. And so like you really can't do that because no one is going to put you back together. And that is something that I definitely learned from my family, but that I think I also just learned from being around a lot of other really stubborn, strong-willed people who thought that being stubborn and strong-willed and smart was cool, right? Like I would not have done well in a different school. Academically, I would have done well, but interpersonally, I would not have done well because I could not put myself down for a second. And I was surrounded by other people who also couldn't.
Chuma, I saw you shaking your head a lot. What about what Chloe had to say resonated with you?
You know, a lot of it. I mean, you know, it's again, it's funny because I'm in that period of time in my life where I don't know if it's because everybody always talks about midlife crisis and shit, so that once you finally get there, you're like, oh, I should be having a midlife crisis right now. Let me go find one, or if it's actually happening. But you know, often we talk about sacrifice, and lately I've been thinking a lot about sacrifice and being who you are. I had a dear friend of mine who's she won one of these grants that, you know, they give you $250,000 somebody's genius grant for being a director, and we have a long history. I auditioned for her at my first time out of college, and then we met catering in Atlanta, and now, I mean, out here first, and now she's a big shot theater director. And I was talking to her. I had a gig. I was lined up to do a gig in Kansas City. I was going to direct a Carlisle Brown play called Down South, and it was about the Cheney. It was loosely based on Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman getting murdered on the side of the road, and you know, during the Freedom Marches. And I was going to direct this full-length version of this play, and then it was going to go move it to the William Inge Festival because we were honoring the playwright with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Short of a long story, by the time we got to the like real nuts and bolts of the contract and stuff, I just got a sense from these good old boys that I was like being tokenized almost, you know, like I was coming in and I was going to work in their theater, but they were going to do all the casting before I got there. They were going to make all the decisions about all the music before I got there. They were just going to do all these things before I got there. When I got there, I was just going to push the actors around and make them do things. And then, you know, stuff on the phone, like, well, you're going to have a lot of people watching over you, you know, while we were talking about this. And this would have been my first major gig as a director, first professional away from home gig as a big professional gig as a director. And I was really strung out about it because you know, everybody's egos are so fragile. And being from New York, I had years where I had to modulate my New Yorkness being out here on the West Coast. And so I didn't really want to tell him what I was really thinking, because in my mind, I'm always thinking, well, who does he know? And who's that? If I piss him off, then he's going to tell somebody else, and they're just going to scratch me off the list because, you know, brothers need all the help they can get and all the negative, you know, we got to keep all the negatives as quotient as low as possible. Anyway, so my friend said, when I asked her about making a decision of whether or not to take the gig, she said she had never, this is a piece of advice she gave me 5 years ago now, and I hold on to it. She has never regretted saying no. Saying no to something has never been one of her regrets. saying yes to things has spawned a lot of regrets. And it's because she knows exactly who she is. And while it was hard for me to turn that check down and turn that credit down and turn that opportunity down, I had to follow my instincts. I had to follow my gut, and I turned it down. And they ended up doing it themselves, and it turned out fine because I was producing the festival anyway, so it wasn't too much of skin off my teeth. But I wanted exposure to a new market. I wanted to work with new people, and it was a play for young kids. So in that sense, you know, there's sacrifice. There's always financial, you know, constraints. You have to, I mean, my first pilot, I made 50 grand and I was like 29 years old. And, you know, I said, okay, well, I'm going to go get another motorcycle championship. I didn't, you know, I was like, I didn't buy a house. Well, I did buy a house, but I spent a lot of time just living my life. You're just trying to enjoy what the life was, not knowing if the tap was going to turn off or not knowing what was coming in the future when I was younger. But the money wasn't there. And as an actor, you know, it's a little bit different maybe from Chloe. Maybe this is why, you know, I'm not going to say maybe this is why you walked away, but it sounds like you had more of a producer in you. It was more coming out of you. Whereas I came to acting kind of late, and I was just going to be a good soldier, you know, and I thought that like the harder you are and the stronger you work and the more you're committed as the good soldier and the easier you are to work with and the more people want to work with you, then the jobs will come. It will be merit based. But like I said, it isn't. It's very personal. You know, it's very much about what that person wants. So for me, I saw that landscape, and I started moving towards producing and directing. And again, I actually feel like I'm a better director than I am an actor, but that in and of itself was another major hill to climb because I don't have an MFA. I have a career as an actor, and the biggest problem for me, especially in Los Angeles particularly, is anytime a playwright comes to me and talks about their play, they always want me to act in it. They don't want me to direct it. So having to now forge a new identity as that kind of leader, and have that executive mindset, that's a whole new challenge for me. But like Chloe broke out and said, I'm tired of theater because I have another voice speaking. That's the way I feel. I just got tired of feeling like I knew more or better and not being respected or appreciated for that. And so moving into directing for me, it has been a natural evolution in terms of my growth and in terms of feeling like I've sort of maybe hit a wall. Even if I were to get a show next week, let's say, or get something major happen in my career next week, in terms of a single point milestone, I'm still moving towards being in a position to spread the wealth and use my experience to now trickle down and do things the way that I wish they were done for me. So for example, the play I'm directing at UGA, they're all so surprised. Part of the reason we've been through our pre-production design meetings and we're midway into our design meetings now, our production meetings now, because I go on Saturday. And I just keep getting affirmations of how much everybody appreciates the freedom that I've given them. And even with the student designers, they ask me a question every time. I say, well, what do you want to do? You know where I'm coming from. You know what I want it to be. Tell me what you want to do. This is as much of a showcase for your talent, if not more of a showcase for your talent than it is for mine. You're building the set. You're making the costumes. Put your own life, put your own spirit into it. And then let's see if we meet in the middle. Obviously, the essence of what a collaboration should be. But I mean, maybe Chloe can speak this in the art world, but in the theater world, often collaborations aren't collaborations. You do what you're told if you want that space. And if you don't, there's somebody coming right behind you who will.
Well, I want to just move, the conversation a little and I want to give a personal anecdote, and maybe some way it connects with what you just said, but it's a little lighter. Like I mentioned earlier, I danced at Hunter, and it actually did influence my career choice of becoming a dance therapist. And I remember taking dance class at 466 at this point, and before we moved to 94th Street, and then we learned the dance, the Mizzaloo. So we were taught to dance the Mizzaloo, and those days we walked around in leotard and tights all day long. And we spontaneously danced the Mizzaloo out of the room, down the hallway, and into, I believe it was Dr. Bumby's, either Dr. Bumby's or Mr. Clutch's math class. And we had fun. And Hunter was a school where we could do that and there was no repercussions. It was like, we're in our leotards and tights dancing the Mizzaloo. Chloe, was there a time at Hunter where you could just be spontaneous in who you were? Or
I
your
think
class?
like probably from like September 1st, 1988 until, June 27th, 2002. I was being pretty much myself. Yeah, I remember less, but definitely a lot of singing, a lot of spontaneous singing, a lot of reckless behavior in the hallway between classes. I got in trouble for having a coffee maker in a locker and giving out coffee to students, but then I started giving it out to faculty, and so the problem went away for a little while. Then it sort of resurfaced. I was just kind of like creating like social situations and situations of gathering pretty much consistently. And it was like that was either going to fly or it wasn't. But most of the time it seemed to be fine. And again, like one of the great things about Hunter is people were doing different things in different spaces all over the building, but it wasn't a problem, right? I'm not going to say that there were no confrontations, that there were no people who didn't get along well, that everybody liked each other all the time and was equally respected. It's a high school. We know that's not true. But like by and large, there was a very strong live and let live attitude. And, I think the other thing that I really benefited from personally was like a super strong sense of student leadership, right? Like, we're going to do musical rep. We're going to direct the play. I directed musical rep my senior year, right? And like came up, getting ready to do that and feeling like I was going to be prepared to do that. And when you say to other people, like, yeah, I was managing 80 people doing a musical and I was 17 years old, they look at you like you're crazy. And for us, that was completely normal and baked into the culture of where we were, mostly for good and sometimes for like a little requisite amount of evil.
And Chuma, do you remember any spontaneous moments at your time at Hunter? Creative moments. You're muted.
Yeah, I got it. Spontaneous creative moments. I'm not sure where that falls. I don't know what that is.
Well, just spontaneous.
I think. I mean, Hunter was a lot. And it shaped me and guided me in a lot of ways. But there were some big holes there too in a lot of ways, and there were some things that the older me now looking back kind of go, wow, that was a moment where if the chips had fallen a different way, that could have been an amazing learning experience that could have catapulted me somewhere, you know what I mean? Where I think part of what was going on with me was that me and Ya and Josh and Angel and the boys, were boys, and we were young and wild and athletic and energetic and unbridled and too fucking smart for our own good. And I think at times we overwhelmed the school. I think there were a lot of us that despite all the things that we had going for us, we might have just been too much of a handful. Again, I think there was a mentorship piece. I can remember being told often that, Chuma, you'd be a great leader if you just calm down. You'd be a great leader if you just didn't act up so much. Which, in again, through years of therapy and years of social study, it would have been nice if someone could have sat me down and took the time, instead of being punitive or instead of being, you're doing bad. It would have been nice to have had a blueprint. It would have been nice to have been mentored along in a way that, as a 16-year-old who can jump out of the gym or run like the wind or be charismatic as all get out, and I'm not speaking about myself, I'm speaking about all my friends, a lot of us really struggled just up against the regular system of being in a school, being in a public school, having to, be certain places on time, not being able to kind of cut up in class, not being able to really express yourself in class, not being able to really key towards what it is that made you tick. I mean, I had a great time, and I had a great time in college too, but I don't think in either one of those situations I had clear direction, because I was just living life. And in my search for direction, I think, what originally might have been athletics, when it became the theater, that was the place where I could be all that energy I had could go someplace. And it was rewarded and it was appreciated. And through the process of making a collaborative art, I learned, well, this is really good for you to go crazy right here. But then if you calm down over here, then everybody else can go crazy, just the dynamics of putting on a play really helped form and shape for me what hierarchy was, what the importance of being responsible to other people was on a personal level, what certain responsibilities are, in terms of growing older as a human, as a person, and I'll speak in the eye as a man, what it kind of takes. I was just talking to my girlfriend about, I feel like I was, my parents actually the other day were getting on me because they were telling me, oh, you were such a handful. I said, okay, give me 3 times in high school when I was a handful. All my friends lived in the Bronx, Brooklyn, or Queens, and I was not allowed out after the lights turned on the street. So I wasn't running the streets. I couldn't sneak out. I didn't have no money. I got okay grades. I wasn't failing out. And then certainly by the end of the school term, I was doing well. Where was I a problem? And they kind of told me the same stupid 2 stories they always tell, which weren't even my issue. They were somebody else in the school's issue with me. And it just really showed me that, when you look at young men, again, I'll speak for myself. When you look at young men in school, even in an art school, I think there's a lot of there isn't enough focus on how to guide the ones that don't sort of fall into that middle, that mean of students that are easy to teach and do all their homework and are completely responsive in class and don't have any issues at home. It feels like even in the arts, that mean is catered to, but you may have somebody who's on one extreme end or the other who might benefit from extra attention, who might benefit from not getting an F, but maybe getting a D, or maybe getting some help, or maybe sitting down and talking to them. And when I was doing theater for young audiences when I graduated college, and every time we went to a school with a play, they would all say, okay, well, the kids are in the auditorium and we hope they're going to behave for you guys. But, you know, if they start getting loud and acting up, we're right here. And every time we opened our mouths, we had them in the palm of our hands. The show was designed to really speak to them. And we were young and we had them in the palm of our hands. And they weren't the hellions that they were sort of, you know, described to be. And now as I age in my work with students and my work with kids, you know, I don't have children. So I, you know, haven't been in that realm of being a parent and raising kids. And I'm not a teacher, so I haven't had to show up every day and influence and shape young minds my whole life. No, admittedly, but I was a child for a long time. I did go to school for a long time. And I know how I was treated, and I remember very well how I was treated. And I just think that we push kids so hard in class. We push them to excel, especially at some place like Hunter, where you got to take a test to get in. And now I hear they're cutting people to get in that school and pushing people off of bridges and shit, you know, to get your spot. The pressure just doesn't leave enough breathing room, I think, for people, especially who are inclined to the arts, because we don't always play by the same rules everybody else does.
Wow. Yeah, I think that that's something that people who are in the arts, many people will, you know, have experienced that sometimes, you know, the thought process is different, or the, you know, the expectations are for the, you know, to be one way, and you're thinking differently, or you're just not understood. Like, why do you want to go in that direction? you know, this is, be a nurse. That's a respectable profession, you know, and you know, you study the sciences and you'll find a job. You know, so I think that that's something to think about in terms of education in general. The more and more that even in Hunter, that the arts aren't focused on, like I said, when I was in school, I had dance. I walked around in leotard and tights, and that's no longer considered, you know, a subject. That's not physical education, you know. So the arts are not an avenue for, it's not so much available for kids to express themselves and express and accepted form of creativity and all that. We're really tending, like, no, you got to sit and pay attention, you know, focus. So I think that you say words for us to think about, and those in education to think about. And with that, I'll ask Chuma. So whose shoulders do you stand on? Who influenced your work, and who, as an actor, and whose shoulders do you stand
on? I mean, let me first say that you know, saying all that about Hunter, the flip side is that I also had an incredible amount of support and freedom in that school. I feel like the teachers and the staff and the faculty were also unique individuals and special people that ran that school, that taught at that school. I got in trouble, but even in getting in trouble, there was an understanding that we were all in a special place. So it wasn't like I was getting sent to detention or anything, you know what I mean? And there are a lot of teachers there that I still remember, and that I still got a lot out of. Maybe not who they were in the classroom, but certainly who they were in the hallway with me, who they were at lunch, who they were at basketball practice, who they were out in the courtyard when they saw us. We were humans to the teachers at Hunter. And I think that really helped shape my identity, for better or for worse, that despite some of what I said before, we were all treated with respect. and we were all humanized and allowed to be the humans that we could be. So I just want to say that as well. I was thinking about that question about standing on shoulders too, you know, who was there? And again, that's one of the reasons why I'm really leaning into mentorship now, is that, I mean, the two people that I've stand on the shoulders of are my mother and father. Like, that's number one. And number two, they are, you know, the people that really just sort of set the model and guided my path in life. And they work harder than anybody I know. Sometimes, and anybody who knows my folks know that, you know, they set a very high bar, and, you know, they're very hard. That is a shadow that is one of those things for me that it's very hard to, you know, sometimes come out from under in my own personal struggles with who I am in my career and in my life, when, you know, your exemplars are exemplary, whatever that word is. I'm reaching the end of my vocabulary. Sidney Poitier died the other day. I'll never forget having lunch with him and feeling like he was somebody special. I think he paved a way. I don't know if I'm standing directly on his shoulders, but I think he paved a way. But I think for me, as much of like any sort of direct thing, I mean, you know, he's on the Zoom, so I'm gonna talk about him. But, you know, like having a almost like an uncle figure or father figure, like, you know, Mr. Austin, like Coach Austin, you know, being my basketball coach and the music coach. You know, it's like what I say about Barack Obama is, you know, not necessarily about what he did as president, but the fact that he was president. And being, you know, somebody like Mr. Austin, not necessarily the fact that, you know, he was a teacher, but that he was the man he is, you know, and that he didn't take any shorts, and that he was big and tall and brown and beautiful and sang and danced and played music and coached basketball. You know, it was the influence, it was the model that he made, you know, not necessarily the clapping and the music or the machine gun drills, you know, or anything like that. Or having me come off the bench instead of start, you know, none of that stuff. But even that, like, it's funny because I took pride in that, you know, and he explained, you know, it's like, this is a tiny little anecdote, but I mean, I remember there are two things about Mr. Austin I remember. One was I remember the conversation he had when he was taking me out of the starting lineup because I was too damn hyper, but I was smart. So he said, you sit on the bench, you'll be the first one off the bench, watch the game, see what's happening, and then you will know what to do when you get in there. And then I would get in there and rack shot. So that actually has been my career. Like, I'm not, like, I feel like that's my role, is that I sit, I watch, and then when I need to jump in, you know, that. So in a way, he really kind of saw me, you know, and I'll never forget those. I mean, me and Yaya were joking about practice this morning. We were talking about machine gun drills and stuff. But, you know, the fact that we can joke about that 40 years later, you know, 35 years later, really, that is the anecdote in and of itself. And then the other story, and sorry, Chloe, I'll kick it to Chloe. But the other story is, you know, you talk about being yourself and what does that mean? Well, when my summer between my 15th and 16th year, I grew out my afro and twisted dreads. And this was 1988, maybe 1988. Kid and play, maybe. Nobody had dreads yet. And certainly not the little ones when you first start and they kind of like stick up, you know, like that. Man, by the time October rolled around, Mr. Austin said, no, sir. You're going to cut that bomba clout hair off your head. You're going to play on my team, boy. We ain't having you running around here with that mop on your head, dancing around. And don't you know, Charlene Hunter Galt was ready to go to federal court over that. I never told you that. But my mama was getting ready to take your ass to court, bruh. And my dad said, now, Charlene, Now, let's say you go to court and you win, and then the boy doesn't get to play. He gets to keep his hair, but he sits his ass on the bench. Is that really what you want for the boy? And I thought about it too, and I was like, yeah, let's maybe not make such a big deal out of this one, which was tough because anybody who knows anything about dreads knows that took a long time to get to that point. Mm-hmm. But it was more important for me to play, to prove that to myself, than it was any silly haircut. But 20 years later in Hollywood, the same kind of thing happened. You know, it was like, hey boy, to play, you got to look a certain way. And I struck out against that. So it was, in a way, it was kind of familiar to me. And I was able to then say, okay, I understand from then what that meant, but now this is my choice and this is my time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chloe, I would like you to respond to the same question. We'll have like about 10 minutes at the end. If those want to ask questions, you can put them in the chat and I'll read them out. So you can put your questions in the chat now. But Chloe, can you talk about whose shoulders you stand on, please? And who influenced your work?
So I'm in a CUNY building, which means my light goes off after every half hour if I don't like move around a lot. So that's what's been happening every time. What's happening? There is no way for me to prevent that from happening. So thanks for bearing with it. So yeah, definitely. I mentioned already my mother's an artist. My dad is my dad is a psychoanalyst and a philosopher, and he teaches at the New School. So you can call that what you want to call it, but definitely like their work and their way of living has had a huge impact on me. But I would say also creatively, there's a long line of artists and writers that I consider to be descended from: Lorraine O'Grady, Adrian Piper, writers like Claudia Rankine and Maggie Nelson, some collaborative groups, which Chuma mentioned collaboration in the theater and how it's really oftentimes just doing what you're told. And I think that can be true in the theater as well as in the arts, but I also have had other collaborative experiences in both fields, right? Where what you are seeing is what happens when you really co-author something so that you don't remember what part of it is yours and what part of it is coming from someone else. And I think that has been a huge influence on me. And then just generally, being a New Yorker is probably the biggest thing I'm standing on the back of, and it impacts everything that I do, every way that I think about people coming together, every way that I kind of fit or don't fit in any places that I am. It's impacting a way of moving through the world that I draw from in creative ways probably every single day of my life. So that's a big one for me.
Thank you for that. And I'm not seeing any questions. So not yet. Maybe we've covered everybody's.
Does everybody know that they can just put questions in the chat?
Yes, that's why I said you could put a question. If you have a question, you could put it in the chat. But meanwhile, while we're waiting for that, I'll ask another question. So what advice would you give to, okay, so we have a question. Can you tell us where we can see your newest work? And I'll pose both. I know Chuma put his book in the chat early on, but
go ahead, Chloe.
Sure. Yeah, I have work in shows up right now at Mass MoCA in North Adams, and also at the Center for Book Arts here in New York. I'm opening 3 solo shows of work this year, but they're all on the West Coast. So who's in LA? I'm going to have a show opening at the California African American Museum, another one opening at the Skirball Cultural Center, and then one opening in Seattle up at the Henry Art Gallery. So I'm really working on the West Coast this year, almost entirely. And those are the big ones that are coming up for me. So looking at New York shows more in 2023.
Thank you. And Chuma, can you just talk about what you're doing now at the University of Georgia? You mention it again in your book.
Okay, what's happening? I have the last episode of The Rookie I was on. So if anybody wants to see me at work, I was on episode 13 of The Rookie just last week. which, by the way, I was, in these moments of like, man, am I doing the right thing? Man, what am I doing here? I just realized that getting that job this year marks 25 years as a working actor. So you got to take your wins where you can get them. So that's on. I am like Judith said, I am directing Gem of the Ocean at the University of Georgia with their undergrad, grad, and PhD students. That opens on April 14th and runs through the 24th. I just did this book on Black excellence by Jeff Shar. I think it's in the thingamabobby. Where else? What else is coming up? I think that's it. The William Inge Center for the Arts is honoring Lynn Nottage this year with their Lifetime Achievement Award. I am possibly flying to Germany to do the play American Son, which Kerry Washington did on Broadway and then made a TV version of. So if it works out, I'm cast in the show, but because of this directing thing and COVID, it's on the line of whether or not I'll be able to make it to go to Germany with the show. But that would be the next sort of theater experience that's coming down the pipe for me.
Okay, thank you. So we do have a question. It's addressed to Chloe. The person would love to hear more about the intimacy among 8 million New Yorkers. The pandemic has brought home how much we rely on each other, not only to care for each other, but to give each other space. So person would like to hear you talk, a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the pandemic has brought to our attention a lot of things that were always true, but that we kind of could allow ourselves to escape from or forget through all these different means that are no longer at our disposal. That is not a unique to me thought. There's lots of writing around that all over the place. But, I think that right before the pandemic, one of my favorite moments, and this is a moment that I've used in my work a few times, was like, you get on the subway and it's crowded, but you get the seat and you kind of wedge in between two people and then you're touching them, right? You're touching them. Your leg is touching their leg or your shoulder's touching their shoulder, or whatever it is. And it's okay. That's okay, right? Simultaneously, now it's less okay. This now is different. We want space. We need space for health, whatever. Simultaneously, New York City is like the best place to walk down the street and just have yourself a little cry and people will leave you alone. And I love that because sometimes you don't really need any involvement with your little cry, right? You just need a little bit of space to walk down the street and do that. And it's kind of finding ways that to highlight those moments that we recognize and appreciate and call like part of our cultural selves and the meat of our lives, and bring that into other arenas where maybe it's a little bit misplaced or a little bit eerie or a little bit magical or replicated between lots and lots of people, and seeing what that changes about those moments and how we see or experience them differently. So, I say that the ultimate goal of my work is I will work at intimacy at the scale of the metropolis. And I don't know if I'm going to get there in my lifetime, but I'm hoping to leave a legacy of work that allows people to kind of see how those steps could have been taken either in art or in everyday life.
Thank you. So the next question is, as Black artists, what kind of venues would you like to see increase? And for Chuma, what stories would you like to see more of?
Oh, you want to take the first part of that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, what kind of venues do I want to see increase? I don't know because we've been in such a weird place in the last couple of years. And I feel like Black art in the visual art world and the museum art world also had gotten to a very like weird place, which is sort of a good place. And then also like a deeply market driven, really complicated capitalism place. And then the pandemic happened. And I would say at this point, I'm confused. So instead of like what type of venue I would want to see more of, I think what I would like to see more of within venues is the ability for complicated work to exist by all different types of artists. So, right, representation alone is not key for me personally. I think that within representation, there's a lot more that we can ask for, and there's a lot more that our work can be asked to do and to speak to. So I actually don't do Black History Month events for arts organizations. This is the only one that I'm gonna do. And there's other types of places that I would do it for, But for arts organizations, I won't, because I think as an artist, my voice is good every single day of the year. And there's a lot of other months where I'm available, and we can talk about Blackness at any time in any of those months on any of those days. But I'm not going to do it for you because it's February, right? I will do this because this is a different kind of community that I'm a part of. And I don't feel like it's trying to capitalize on this in the same type of way. But I want to see levels of complication beyond representation within venues. And then we'll get to more venues once that's possible, because more venues that just sort of replicate that is not it for me.
And Chuma, what stories would you like to see more of?
I mean, Chloe sort of hit it right there at the end there for me. And that's that one that's like, I'm Black 12 months of the year, and I'm an artist 12 months of the year, not just in February. So thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. I mean, the same thing kind of falls in line with the kind of stories you want to see. I just looked at I don't know where it came. Oh, I fired up my Facebook for the first time in 5 years, and I saw an old picture of a reading that I did at a theater here called the Bootleg. That's sort of one of our bigger small theaters, well-known small theaters, and it was about a guy who was suffering from depression, and he had to care for his daughter. And the depression was because he went through a particularly ugly divorce. I got to be a part of it because the playwright was a part of the Inge Festival one year, and we got put in touch. And it was beautiful and painful, and not at all had to be a Black man or a Black girl or anything like that. It was a play about emotion and your mental state. And I just feel like for me and the stuff I've seen and the part of the performing arts, that I've been a part of, our argument out here is always, you're writing a Black character just so you can get a Black person in your project or in your show. And that's not going to cut it. It's also not going to cut it to write a character that's completely lacking of any culture and then just stick a Black person in it so that you can say your theater or your show was multi-culti. When you have when it's just a complete walk, not even an acknowledgement in any sort of way, that doesn't work either. But as my partner will tell you, I am so tired now. I'm like physically tired of the Underground Dam Railroad and so-and-so's march and so-and-so's housekeeper and so-and-so's slave and so-and-so's escaped slave and so-and-so's never was a slave. I'm just like, that has been sort of the typical reaction to how do we increase Black stories is, well, let's just go to the well instead of, like there's a show I'm watching called Crew. I think it's called Crew or J Crew or Crew, somebody's Crew. And and it's fun because it's like a bunch of young urban professional Black people who sit around and drink wine and try different bars and break up with girls and date people and have relationships. And Grand Crew. Thank you, my love, in the other room. That just it's but every now and then you're like, they fall into something that's like, oh yeah, that's you're a brother, like this is an episode about maybe facing something that you had to face today, or oh, you were fighting the fight because you're a woman, but it turns out the fight was because you're a Black woman. Oh, that's interesting, but it slides in. That's the kind of stuff I want to see. If you want to be true to, okay, let's open up to more Black stories, then let's put it in the context of where we are in 2022. Let's put it in the context of that maybe you're a Black person who, doesn't vote Democratic. Let's see some of that. And let's not see that one pilloried. I got a one of those trends that is a personal trend that I keep a scorecard of, that I've never seen anybody keep a scorecard of, but it's that anytime you see strong, light-skinned men in anything other than the romantic lead, they're always playing somebody twisted and fucked up. As if the combination of the white and the black, if that's what it is they must be crazy, or they're the really devious. Watch current television, and some of the most devious characters are the lighter skinned characters, and it's like consistent all the way across. It's been the weirdest thing to come to kind of grips with, and I myself have been in some of those roles. I think I would like to see more leadership, more writers, I mean, we have a lot of writers, but more writers that aren't here in Los Angeles, more writers that are in Tampa, more writers that are in Chicago, more writers that are in Denver, that are producing work together. You need a writer, you need a producer, you need the artistic, the actors or the actors. You need more community. There isn't enough community. When you come to Los Angeles, you have to really fight to have a community of Black folks like that's there for you all the time. The entertainment industry fractures the connections that Black people have together, and we end up fighting each other over these crumbs, and it gets so selfish and devious at times that it's really, like, I think something that those of us who have reached a certain point in the community really need to look back and sort of talk to each other about, and be like, man, you shouldn't be fighting for this. You should be working together to create your own thing, and stop asking them to let us have anything. I've been in a couple of theater company meetings where they say, well, we're going to see if they want to let us do blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, then I'm out, because I don't want nobody letting me do nothing. I want someone to accept that what we're bringing to the table is on par with anything you got. But that takes a village, that takes a community. And pandemic brought some of us closer together, but it also pushed a lot of us apart. But I think coming out of pandemic now, that's one of my major things. I mean, I always, like I said, once you're a gatekeeper, once you've been in the industry, once you have any kind of experience, once you should turn around and say, okay, let me take that young person and let me hold this young person's hand and let me talk to as many young people as I can talk to and really break down what game is.
Well, thank you, Chuma, and thank you, Chloe. It's that time. We have to end the evening.
Yeah,
well, you talked your truth, so, and I think that we appreciate hearing both of your truths about your experiences as artists, your experience as of people of color in the industry, and your experiences at Hunter. So I'd like to thank again Chuma and Chloe for spending their evening with us. I'd like to thank everybody that attended, tonight's event, and to let you know the Diversity Committee we're having another celebration. Yes, it's in the context of, Black History Month or Women in History Month, but it's all American history. So here in the United States, it's all American history. So, so we celebrate. And this is why I bring on present day, what's happening with people, alums today, and not always talk about, what happened 300 years ago, because we're making history every day. So thank you, everybody, and looking forward to seeing you at the next event.
Thank you. Great to see everybody.
Bye.
Okay,
thanks.
bye.
Have a good night, everyone.
Ah.